Hello everyone, it is Reviews Kingdom, and wow, Muppets from Space. What a great movie, you guys. I mean, seriously, this movie is so great. I can't see myself living without it. I mean, it's so good that... Oh yeah, I forgot. This is the Skillet Retrospective. Sorry, Muppets from Space. You're gonna have to live another day. Hello everyone, it is Reviews Kingdom, and today I am back for another video and another edition of the Skillet Retrospective. That's right, we're going back to the Skillet Retrospective. It seems like it's just becoming a monthly thing at this point, which, you know, like I said before, at this rate I might be done around October, so, well, I still got a few more months before this is over. But anyways, that's besides the point. In this edition of the retrospective, I'm here to be taking a look at Skillet's third album, Invincible, which came out in 2000. And, well, I'm just gonna pre-warn everyone, in the last video we covered Hey You, I Love Your Soul, and, well, that album wasn't very good. I might even say it was pretty bad. But you know what? This right here, the album art is, well... You know what? I really can't tell if this is better or worse. I don't know. My eyes are just... I don't know. My brain is almost melted at this point. After listening to Hey You, I Love Your Soul, my brain is just gone. But you know what? Maybe this album could have a lot better songs on it than Hey You, I Love Your Soul. Maybe the writing can improve. Maybe John will actually sound like he's actually interested in singing the music instead of sounding like he's half asleep, you know? Maybe. The possibilities are endless. So, without further ado, without wasting any more time, let's get into Skillet's third album, Invincible. God help us all. So, in the last edition of the Skillet Retrospective, we covered the second album, Hey You, I Love Your Soul. And in case you haven't watched that video, just know this. The album wasn't very good. There were a lot of problems with the album. The writing was stale and tired, and on top of that, the music was just as uneventful as any of the lyrical content on the album. But most importantly, John Cooper just sounded like he was bored to tears while recording the record. I was debating calling it a sophomore slump, but then it hit me. In order for that line to work, the first album has to come out hugely successful and superior in contrast to the second album. But both of these albums are just really not my thing. Now, fast forward to the year 2000, Skillet releases yet another album, and much like once before, they changed up a few things. For starters, the lineup changed. The release of this album saw two band members leaving, those being Ken Strotz and Trey McClurton. Both left the band for their own reasons, and they left on good terms. And yet, for some reason, Trey is still on the album cover, despite him not reprising his role as the drummer. But hey, what are you going to do about that? But aside from losing two members, in came three new members. That's right, taking over for Trey for drums is Laurie Peters. For guitarist, Kevin Holland took over as the guitarist. And for the keyboards, Corey Cooper, aka John Cooper's wife, joined the band. So, as we can see, the band has finally driven away from their grungy roots and shifted to a more electronic rock sound. But how does this album fare out? Well, let's find out. Now, as I mentioned before, this album is more electronic and symphonic than the two previous albums. And, well, you know, as much crap I have given Skillet for the last two albums, their willingness to change for each of these three albums is something I can appreciate. They aren't sticking to one sound and just running with it, and that's something I could appreciate. Of course, you could say that's just the bare minimum of expectations, but hey, at least I have some praises for the band so far, and as soon as I started this album, I think I have my socks blown off. Well, let's just get this shit show on the road. You know, I just got non-existent places to be, non-existent people to see, you know. I'm a very busy man too, you know. I want to have time for myself. I don't want to always be doing these album reviews. But you know what? Let's just do it. Let's just get it over with. Wow. That is so cool. What the fuck was that? You mean Skillet can have energy in their songs? Whoa. Now, to some, this doesn't sound crazy, but coming hot off the trails of Hey You, I Love Your Soul, this is truly shocking. Like, you mean to tell me that Skillet can actually have energy to their songs? And for the record, that's something I feel gets vastly improved in this album. The sound and tone of this album is much more better than it ever was in the first two albums. It's much more upbeat and lively, and it feels way more energetic this time, which makes the album slightly more better to listen to. Of course, it's not perfect, however, that's just what I come to expect at this point, but it kind of has a nice feel to the album. It's very futuristic and synthier, giving a sense of an otherworldly feeling, which I really think isn't that bad of an idea. Sure, it's a very outdated and cheesy way of what was considered the future in 2000, but it's certainly better than the dingy and inconsistent feeling of the self-titled record, and Hey You, I Love Your Soul, that's for damn sure. In some doses, the sound helps soften the blow of the writing, which I will get to in a bit, people, don't worry. I think it could have dialed it back a bit on the synthesizers, though. Like, sometimes the drums and guitar feel like they were programmed into the album and not being played by the respective band members. Not to mention, sometimes it can just make the album sound very goofy at points, like it's background music for a zany cartoon or something. But I think it works serviceably well enough to say, hey, at least they tried, which is the least I can hope for. Speaking of improving from the last two albums, let's talk about the main man himself, John Cooper. Holy crap, is this an improvement or what? In the last album, John sounded like he was bored to tears and like he was on the verge of falling asleep singing the lyrics of each song. He had this whisper-like vocal style, which in my opinion just really didn't work for him at all. But here, that whisper vocal style is completely gone, and now he sings with full confidence and stride. Some may say that John was still not confident in the first two albums, but Invincible, that's not the case at all. He sounds way more passionate and ambitious in this album. But at the same time, I must realize that this still is John Cooper, and despite him being better than he was in the previous two albums, it still isn't anything to write home about. He shows more passion in the album, sure, but at the same time, he's really nothing that special either. He's not bad or anything, don't get me wrong, but outside of an energy and aesthetic change, he still is the same old John Cooper. To be fair, I think this has more to do with the writing for these songs on the album. And don't worry, we will get to that eventually, but he doesn't really have too much of a flair to amplify these lyrics or make them sound bolder than what they are, which is a running problem I have with him as a vocalist and a lyricist as a whole. So yeah, he did improve, but only by a little bit, which, hey, at least some improvement is occurring here. But John isn't the only member of the band. How did the other new members fare out? As for the new drummer, Lori Peters, I feel like she does a well enough job hitting all the right notes, all things considered. It gives these songs a bit of a punchier feeling to the album, which is something I can definitely appreciate about the sound. However, is she as good as Trey McClurkin though? Somewhat. To me, their styles feel pretty similar, and both are well enough to say that it's not that bad, so, well, there's always that. Though I will have to say that the drums can often get lost in the mixing of the album, and often that sound feels like it's programmed or non-existent. Which sucks because she has some genuine talent, but it can get drowned out in the electronic and symphonic elements of the album, which is kind of a problem I kind of have with the mixing as a whole when it comes to the album, but that's a whole nother can of worms, so we'll get there when we get there. Speaking of symphonics, let's talk about Corey Cooper. Corey Cooper, as mentioned before, plays keyboard and is in control of all the electronic elements, and she really single-handedly can be attributed to the new life that she brings to this album to Skillet. It really does brighten up the tone of the album, which makes it feel more polished. Unfortunately, at the cost of doing so, it can also make the album sound cheesier, more so than it was already going to be. It sounds like a very dated vision of what the future was in 2000, and you really never stop noticing it. Though I guess I can't really fault the album too much for it, as Corey can make some of the ballads sound noticeably better on the album, giving an otherworldly aspect to songs like Rest, The One, and Each Other. So she's not too bad, but not too great either, and that's still better than anything from the last album had to offer, that's for sure. And last, but certainly not least, we have Kevin Holland on the guitar. He is okay, I suppose. Now, he does have a few good hooks and good riffs here and there, especially with the song Best Kept Secret, and he definitely does show potential. But much like Lori, the hit-or-miss mixing leaves most of his work to the album to feel programmed in, rather than feeling more authentic. Come to think of it, I think most of the problem I have with this album sonically has to do with the wonky mixing. I get it's an industrial rock album, and I'm expecting electronic elements, but I would also love to hear what the other band members are contributing to the sound. I also failed to mention this, but John's bass work also feels lost in the mix. But then again, it was like that for the last two albums, so I really can't tell if the bass was just lost in the mixing, or John is really just not that interesting as a bassist. Either way, it's very hit or miss, but when it works pretty well, I'd say. I just wish it was more consistent, but there's nothing I can do about that, sadly. What's really not helping the album is the lyrics. I think at this point it's becoming increasingly clear that Skillet as a whole are not master lyricists. In fact, I would go as far as to say as they aren't really that good at writing. My problem with the writing is that it feels too safe and too sterile, leaving no room for any interpretation or ambiguity whatsoever. My problem isn't that the songwriting is overtly Christian, which is not a bad thing, it's just that it's stuck in the confines of a safe Christian rock album. There's no risk or any new topic to be explored or to be found here, which in turn makes these songs feel like they lack a backbone or creativity. They're just very simple songs, which I guess can work for some people, but it makes these songs feel like they have no substance backing it outside of an occasional catchy chorus or hook. Songs like Each Other just really solidify how creatively bankrupt and cheesy these lyrics are. Everything is just so unremarkably straightforward and nothing at the same time. Occasionally you get a song like Invincible or The Fire Breathes that brings in some semi-interesting writing from John Cooper, but for every Invincible, there are like 10 different Say It Louds. Speaking of which, this album introduces another problem: repetition. I get the complaint that Christian music is just the same regurgitated topics over and over again, but it couldn't have been more apparent in this album. I swear, it feels like sometimes they found a decent sounding lyric and just stretched it out for 3 to 4 minutes, which makes these songs longer than they really are. Say It Loud is repeated ad nauseum in that song, and you never stop noticing it. It's such a mundane and asinine way to make these songs feel longer. As I said before, Skillet have never been master lyricists or anything like that, but Invincible really proves this even further. It's just a shame because this album has better elements from the first two albums, but it ultimately still comes off as a sloppy, undercooked album that could have been so much better if it had better mixing and a bit more production time to be fully realized. It's better than the self-titled and Hey You I Love Your Soul for sure, but it still lacks anything genuinely interested to keep me listening to it. It's not quite a bore fest, and I can mostly attribute that to the writing of this album being so cheesy it's almost endearing, but at the same time, I struggle to find any musical substance or that much enjoyment to be had from this record. But if I can give it this, the album definitely seems like a step in the right direction for the band as it breathes new life, and they very well could go all out on the next album. But that remains to be seen in the next album, of course. So, unlike the last album, this one gives me a bit of hope for the next album to be something above average, which can only be a good thing, of course. Plus, I also didn't fall asleep while listening to this record, so that's always a better plus than the last album. So what do I think of Skillet's Invincible? And well, this might blow your mind, but it's way better than Hey You I Love Your Soul. I know, wow, that is mind-blowing. Craziest thing you'll hear today. And it's also safe to acknowledge that is a not very high bar to cross, but I digress. So yes, Invincible is leagues better than Hey You I Love Your Soul, sure, but at the same time, it sucks to say this, but it's still kind of a boiling pot of mediocrity. And look, it sucks to hear me say that because, well, believe it or not, I am trying to be positive. And, well, I do have positive things to say about this album. I think that the production is better, the mixing is better, the instrumentation is better. John Cooper as a vocalist sounds like he actually wants to record an album as opposed to falling asleep while recording the record. And the lyrics are 0.1% better. And, I mean, just you can tell that Skillet was genuinely trying to improve with this record because the last two records were crummy at best, but this one, you can tell that they were actually trying with this album as opposed to just phoning it in, which actually kind of makes me excited to go forward in this retrospective because, well, if we just keep getting more improvement from Skillet, then that can only mean that there's only one way up but the top. So, I mean, who knows, maybe Skillet may get better from here on out. But yeah, as it stands, Skillet's Invincible is, well, still mediocre, but, well, there is some enjoyment to be had with this record. There are a few good songs on here. Best Kept Secret, Invincible, Each Other. There's some pretty good songs on here. The Fire Breathes, there's some pretty good songs on here. A lot better than Hey You I Love Your Soul and the self-titled, but you know what? Yeah, it's still mediocre. We're still not quite to that crescendo yet. But regardless of that, if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and see you later. I'm gonna go watch Muppets from Space. Yeah, this is gonna be so good. Well, shit. I guess they can all be winners.